All right, the grade 11 remembers. The things to remember when you're doing the methods. In the top left, let's take a look at radicals. So remember to use the radical laws. Remember that sometimes it asks you for exact value where you have to do algebra, or a decimal where you can use the calculator. In order to add and subtract, you must have the same index and the same radicand. They have to be like terms. And multiply and divide, you just must have the same index. Because you can multiply and divide the numbers underneath if you have the same index. And then some things that you can't do with letters and their corresponding numbers beside them. And a nice little remember, when you're foiling a conjugate, you just have to do F and L because O and I cancel. Okay, a little bit on quadratics. So remember, you can factor something and get it equal to 0, or you can use the square root method and make sure the answer is plus minus and just make sure the answers are the same. Be very careful with negative distribution and removing a greatest common factor of -1. And be careful for backwards distribution. Remember, make your own remembers. When the teacher tells you to remember something, take your remember sheet and write it on the remember sheet in that section. Or make a chapter review sheet and put it there. Okay, rationals down below. All I'm going to say is don't make any of the common mistakes. And be careful of removing the greatest common factor of -1. Or distribution of -1. Down below, sequences in series. Or just remember to do blanks. Like blank, comma, blank, comma, blank, comma. Again, remember, the BC curriculum tore that chapter apart, so it's now in grade 10 and 11, or 12, and I haven't separated it yet. And one tiny little thing. After. So if, let's say you do a bouncing ball, and you bounce it a few times, and you say, if you drop it from a height of 10, and your definition of blanks are dropping heights, and you say, how high after the 5th bounce? Well, you're actually finding the 6th term. So, after, exclamation mark. Okay, top right, be careful with inequalities. We talked about how you can either do the algebra or use graphing. And remember that the square root of x squared is actually the absolute value of x, and that's why it's plus minus. Okay, so then down below the chapter, absolute values and reciprocals. Remember to do the piecewise function and how to do the positive and negative case when doing algebra. And reciprocals, we have vertical asymptotes, non-provisible values, and invariant points. Trigonometry, remember your calculator has to be in degree mode. If you buy a graphing calculator, it's automatically in radian mode. The mode that we're going to be only using in the future. Some calculators just automatically go when they die back to radian mode. Be careful, you have to be in degree mode. I've had students just fail tests because they bought some fresh calculator for the test and then failed it because their calculator wasn't working. Get used to your calculator, don't use your phone. So we looked at SOHCAHTOA. Remember, we only inverse the positives. And the answer is always the reference angle between 0 and 90. Sometimes we can do substitution. Make sure to check all your answers on the calculator and graph the solution if you want. And remember, in the cosine law, C is the only angle. The rest of it's just letters. It's so much simpler to look at that way. And there's this tiny little thing about where an angle is. This angle of 30 degrees is called 30 degrees north of east, 30 degrees towards the north from the east, or east 30 north, meaning from the east 30 towards the north. I highly suggest writing down those English instructions on top of each other. Rewind the tape, whichever, because those ones are hard to remember. Okay, great. So methods, things to do, remembers, things to remember when doing your methods.